Okay, let's go ahead and come to order. And Transportation Committee meeting today on, we have three pieces of legislation, all of them sponsored by Representative Bill Poole. And we only have requests for a public hearing on one of those bills, and that's House Bill 2, which is the infrastructure bill. So that's the only one that we will have conduct the public hearing for. And tell you what, we're gonna recognize Representative Bill Poole if he will come forward and discuss legislation with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In terms of our procedure and order today, do you want to go through your public hearing first on the proposal, and then I'll present on all fronts as to all, and then we can move through the bills, or how would you prefer to?
Yeah, I think we need to go through all three bills on the public hearing first, which will, in other words, if you'll discuss all three bills, then we only have the public hearing on one of them. And it, yeah, when we get down to the voting today, a motion for a roll call vote is going to take a motion and a second. A motion to table does not take a second. So that's the rules we're going to operate under today. Representative Poole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. And, you know, we are here at a moment that we all know that this is a very significant issue for the state of Alabama. We have a large crowd in the room today that evidences the significance of this moment. And I believe that this issue is, quite frankly, receiving the attention that it deserves. This package of bills is a three-bill package. HB 1 involves strengthening formally and in very clear and purposeful fashions the Joint Transportation Committee of the House and Senate. That is a body that this legislature needs to ensure is utilizing its full authority to oversight and oversee the administration of our taxpayer dollars as related to our road and bridge projects and transportation infrastructure across this state. The Joint Transportation Committee currently exists, but we want to make sure we add strength to that committee, that we have the ability to oversight very clearly every dollar. And without that oversight, and without that accountability, and without that transparency, this discussion would otherwise stop. So that is HB 1. And it is the essential foundation for the remainder of the proposals that will be discussed today. But it is essential, and it is imperative that that is adopted, and that then this legislature commits itself to see through and utilize the authority that this legislature has to oversee that committee and oversee those projects and oversee ALDOT and our Department of Transportation and all other aspects of transportation infrastructure in this state. So that is critical. HB 2 is the bill that I suspect has the long sign-in sheet. That bill is the proposal that is receiving most, if not all, of the attention, and it has overshadowed the Joint Transportation Committee bill. But I want to make sure that that shadow is lifted for a moment, and that we're all reminded regarding the accountability and transparency that's offered and guaranteed under the JTC, we call it, the Joint Transportation Committee proposal. HB 2 presents an important issue for this body and for this state to consider. It is a difficult issue. I will not minimize it. I will face it. And we're all here to face it. There are a lot of opinions on the proposal, as they should be. There's a lot of passion on both sides of this proposal, as there should be. I respect all of those opinions, and all of those opinions should be honored, voiced, articulated, considered, heard, and respected. And I think we're going to hear that today. I have an opinion too on that, which is why I stand before you today, and I'll talk about that. But those opinions will be presented both today and I hope tomorrow and in the future. And I think it will be a healthy discussion and a healthy debate, and I think that's appropriate. I don't shy away from that, and I look forward to that. Because regardless of how this ends, that's the critical phase of this process, is to put ideas and opinions on the table, talk about them, agree, disagree, respect each other, decide what's best for the state of Alabama, and move forward. And that's what we're going to do. But I also want to make sure that as we have this discussion, we have a baseline set of the understanding of the facts. We can disagree on opinions or plans or objectives, but we need to agree on facts. And in my judgment, the facts are pretty clear, and I don't think they're disputed. We'll find out, but I don't think it's disputed that in the state of Alabama, our infrastructure is deteriorating at a rapid pace. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But I hope we can move the debate beyond that point, because I don't think that's disputable. It is deteriorating. It is the absolute spine of our economy, of our daily lives, for every single Alabamian in this state. Every job depends on our infrastructure, our entire economy. If you sit at your home all day and never go onto the road, you still depend on the infrastructure system to deliver whatever it is you're consuming in the home. Everybody depends on it every day. In my judgment, this country really built itself and our success on our infrastructure. Our forefathers, quite frankly, built an incredible infrastructure system, in my judgment, that we have all benefited from. But I think across this nation, we've allowed that infrastructure to deteriorate. We have failed to invest, to maintain, to grow and expand at the pace we should, and Alabama is not an exception to that. Unfortunately, we have fallen further behind, and I'll address that. But I want to be clear before I talk about the needs and some of the facts that this is also about our future. This is about safety. This is about quality of life. This is about jobs. This is about prosperity. This is about growth. This is about competitiveness. And this is about our future. And we're going to choose course like we do on all decisions in this body. We're going to choose course. And we'll, whatever course we choose, we'll go down. And the good people of this state will be good. We'll be fine. But are we going to be the best we can be and give those opportunities and ensure those safety mechanisms for ourselves, our families, our citizens, and our children? And that's the question. It's been 26 years, 1992, the last time Alabama addressed its motor fuel tax revenue to fund roads and bridges. I was a junior in high school. Think about where you were in your life in 1992. Only 7 states in our great country have gone longer without raising their motor fuel funding. 7 states. Out of those 7, most, if not all, have supplemented their motor fuel revenue and transportation funding with other sources. Alabama has not supplemented its motor fuel revenue. Alabama's motor fuel revenues, tax levels, are now dead last in the Southeast. We are at the bottom. We're not next to last, or third from last, or fifth from last. We are last. In the last 5 years alone, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Kentucky, just to name a few. Our southeastern peers, our sister states, our adjacent states, and while they are our sister states in the Southeast, and we're proud of that, they are our competitors. All of those have increased their motor fuel funding in the last 5 years. All of those were passed by Republican majorities with bipartisan support. All of them. This is not a partisan issue. This is a bipartisan issue. This is an issue for every Alabamian, in every corner of the state, and in every community of the state, now and in the future. I believe that you're seeing that action across this country and across the Southeast included, because people are now realizing that the federal government is not going to come save us from our problem as it relates to infrastructure. The federal government is not going to come fix our roads and bridges. So if that's what we're waiting on, we're going to be waiting for a while. Our sister states are not going to come fix them. We've got to fix them. We've got to begin to address this problem. We've got to begin to improve the condition and start that effort. And this will only be a start. This proposal will not fix all the problems. It's not going to repave every road. It's not going to replace every bridge. It's not going to stop highway deaths. It's not going to replace every load-posted bridge so that a child has to leave their home earlier in the morning because the school bus has to drive around a bridge that, as a matter of law, has been deemed too dangerous for a school bus to drive over. It's not going to fix every one of those, but it'll start. And we'll have a chance to grow, to address the most acute safety needs, to address the most acute economic development needs, to address the most acute congestion needs, the most acute farm-to-market needs. You name it, this starts it. So I understand the concerns, but I also want to make sure we understand what we're facing. We also got here for a couple other reasons. Fuel efficiency has increased dramatically since 1992, and that's good. That's positive, and it's going to continue to increase relative to the miles per gallon that vehicles travel on our lanes. But that means that our motor fuel revenue has actually decreased. In 2012, sorry, can I have my water? In 2012, the state of Alabama accrued $625 million in tax revenue from gasoline. In 2017, despite population increases, that number had declined to $588 million. So we have more people, more cars, more trucks, and our revenue is declining. That's a fact. That's not an opinion. Additionally, the costs of inflation have driven up the cost to maintain the system. Cost of inflation to repave, maintain, replace, or even just expand, build new roads and bridges, has increased dramatically. So consequently, we have less revenue with decreased buying power. We can't continue this course. It is not sustainable. What 18 cents per gallon bought in 1992 will now only buy 11 cents estimated. Notwithstanding that the needs are growing faster and faster. And you know what those needs are. I'm not going to tell you what the needs are. Everybody in this room knows what the needs are. We are blessed in Alabama to have an abundance of water resources. More, you could argue, than any other state. But what that also means is we have a lot of bridges. We have over 16,000 bridges in the state of Alabama. Karen, will you put that poster board up? We have over 16,000 bridges in the state of Alabama. Almost half of those, approximately 7,500, are over 50 years old. They are typically designed for a 50 to 75-year lifespan. They're aging, they're not getting younger, and they're not getting replaced. That problem's not going to get better, it's going to get worse. Over 2,500 of those bridges are load posted, so that means that as a matter of law, those have been deemed too dangerous. They are structurally deficient, and they cannot, as a matter of law, be crossed by a school bus, fire truck, timber truck, first responders, log trucks going to market, farm trucks going to market, you name it, heavy equipment. Can't cross those bridges. So what do they have to do? They have to drive further. Well, what does that do? For the common citizen, that means they have to buy more gas, put more miles on their vehicle, wear their vehicle down faster, cost them money. For our businesses, what does it mean? They lose money. They're less competitive. You know, for the log truck, because it takes longer to get from the timber harvest location for our citizen to the mill, that timber's less valuable. So that timber owner loses money. The trucker loses money. We're less competitive. That's just an example. Every business faces it. It hurts our competitiveness. It hurts public safety. It's a very significant issue for the state. The chart, and many of you have seen it before, shows the percentages county by county in the state of bridges that are over 50 years old. I mean, we have a number of counties in the state that over 60% of the bridges are over 50% old. I mean, the numbers are staggering. Safety. We are I think the 6th most dangerous state in the country in terms of highway deaths on our road. That's not acceptable. I don't believe that's acceptable. A majority of those occur on rural roads, and a majority of those are estimated to be due to deficient roadway conditions. Not driver error, deficient roadway conditions. Our repaving schedule on the county level is staggering. Our counties are now, I think, at approximately a 156-year repaving schedule. We have counties that are tearing up what's left of the asphalt so that they can grade it and just let it be dirt because they can't maintain it. I talked to somebody in a county in North Alabama earlier this week, and I forget the number of miles, but they had just milled up and disposed a number of miles of asphalt. They're just going to have a dirt road. That's what our counties are facing. I want to talk about accountability, and I'll talk about this in more detail, particularly when we get to the bill. But if we don't have accountability measures that I can trust, that you can trust, and that more importantly the citizens of this state can trust, then this doesn't work, and it shouldn't work. We have to get these dollars where they go, and we have to be able to demonstrate that to our citizens. Between the Joint Transportation Committee proposal, HB 1, and HB 2, the funding proposal, there are numerous accountability and transparency requirements therein. I'll name a few. For any receiving entity, whether that's the state via ALDOT, county government, or municipal government, the use of the funds can only be utilized for transportation infrastructure improvements. The funds on every level and by every receiving entity will have to be placed in a new and independent account. Why? Because we do not want these funds commingled with any other funds. On the state level, we'll establish the Rebuild Alabama account. All of these funds will be subject to audit to the penny. They can't be commingled with other funds. They can't be wasted. They cannot be diverted. not legally. Furthermore, while the use of the funds is clarified, they are also substantially restricted. These funds cannot be used for salaries, bureaucracy, or overhead other than salaries directly related to a cost or a project. So, no bureaucracy. No more desk jobs with these dollars. No conference room tables. None of that. The dollars also can only be used for, they cannot be used for equipment, supplies, or things of that nature, whether it's for purchase of lease, unless they are directly a part of the transportation project. So what does that mean? That means the traffic control fixtures. If it's not directly installed as part of a project, they can't buy it, lease it, use it, spend it. It has to be part of the project. So no trucks, no new tractors, no new shiny objects, traffic signals and direct implements. Lastly, no buildings for purchase, maintenance, lease, improvements, or otherwise, unless it's directly and integrally tied into the roadway, a la, again, a traffic control structure. So no new buildings, no new pictures on the wall, no new desks, conference room tables. These dollars will go to roads and bridges on the state level and the local level. Local governments will have control of these dollars. They will have flexibility, and they will be able to address the needs that are most acute on that level. We are not going to tell them where to spend their dollars. We will have transparency so we can see, and that transparency will be established in multiple ways beyond just the auditing. Every receiving entity will be required annually to post a list of the priority projects that they intend to utilize these funds for. So they'll have local community involvement. Those lists will have to be posted and published in places and methodologies described in the law. 1 year later, they will be required to post a report that says how they spent those dollars relative to those objectives. So everybody will be able to see. Those reports will be submitted to the JTC also. So we'll be able to see them. Everybody will be able to see them. And when they report for the prior year, they'll plan for the next. And so there'll be a rotation. And so everybody will have a responsibility in the local level to go talk, to be engaged, and influence those priorities and track those dollars, but everybody's going to have that opportunity. Everybody's going to have that opportunity. I'll get into more details when we get into the bills. I will answer your questions to the very best of my ability, and I look forward to that. But I also want to make clear that this is the moment. This is the moment. This is a crossroads. I think, what did Yogi Berra say? When you reach a fork in the road, take it. Well, everybody's about to have to take one. And so this is a moment. And I don't want to build this up into some ridiculous crescendo. And I hate it when we hear about fiscal cliffs, and I'm not in any of that stuff. But I do want to be clear that this is a critical moment for the state of Alabama, in my judgment. Governor Kay Ivey has made this her primary objective. She ran on it. There's no surprises. She asked the people to trust her on this. She's put it out there. I trust her. I think we can all trust her. The good people of this state elected her by significant margins, and I trust her. The legislative leadership in both chambers is fully committed. These proposals have been vetted. They've been worked on for years. There are no surprises. Nobody didn't know this was coming. And here we are. This is about the present, but it's also about the future. and we're going to begin to chart that today. We must address this issue. Alabama has to address this issue. We cannot ignore this issue. We cannot be successful in an effort. We cannot not be successful, in an effort to address our crumbling infrastructure. We have to address it. The cost of doing nothing is not nothing. The cost of doing nothing is significant. It's very significant. It will cost us lives. It will cost us jobs. It will cost us wages. It will cost us opportunities. The cost of doing nothing is not nothing. It will be significant. This is a hard issue. It is a complex issue. We're going to hear a lot of opinions. But I'm willing to stand up here today and say the things I've said and present this to the legislature because we have to have this discussion. And wherever we end up, I'm proud to have an opportunity to be involved in addressing it. And I'm proud to be here and try my best, my very best, to lead on this issue. And where we end up, we'll find out. And I respect everybody's opinions. But I'm willing to do my best to lead Alabama to a better place with more opportunity in a manner that's fair to everybody for both the present and the future. And I look forward to making more comments, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to have a few moments at the beginning of the hearing.
Thank you, Representative Poole. We have all 14 members of the committee present, so we definitely have a quorum. Next, we're going into the public hearing. We have 3 opponents, and we have 13 in favor. Yeah. And we're going to limit you to 3 minutes each, and we'll rotate as long as we have the support and oppose, and then we'll have to get down and just follow the support. But when you see me, if I raise the gavel, we're going to give you about 10 seconds. That means that your 3 minutes are up, and we're ready to move forward. So at this time, what I'm going to ask is that when you come, to address the committee, tell us who you represent, whether you're representing yourself or what group you're representing. So we're going to start out with supporters. We have Mr. Jim Page.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate this opportunity. I also want to thank Governor Ivey for her leadership and certainly Representative Poole for his leadership on this issue. My name is Jim Page, and I serve as President and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce of West Alabama in Tuscaloosa. I'm also Chairman of the Alliance for Alabama's Infrastructure, which is a broad coalition of groups from all over this state that's been working for a long time to get to this point. To us, this issue is about economic development, it's about quality of life, and it's about public safety. You know the data, you know the stats. Representative Poole did a great job of sharing those. The bottom line is we have billions, with a B, billions of dollars of need in this state. And this legislation will start to address those needs. It's going to help both metro areas that need to add capacity. It's going to help rural communities that are desperately in need of help from an economic development perspective. The tax increase that's in this legislation is a measured, conservative, phased-in approach. Even the indexing and the growth that's built in is very conservative. 43% of the revenue we bring in now is paid for by the trucking industry, and 23% is paid by out-of-state drivers. This is a way to get out-of-state drivers who are using our roads and bridges to invest in them as well. And this is also going to give us a unique opportunity to match federal dollars when Congress acts. And 7 southeastern states are already in line ahead of us to get those dollars. There's unprecedented accountability associated with this, you know that. And the Port of Mobile money that is in there, that is the Port of Alabama. That port does not just help Mobile, it helps every county in this state. And we've got an opportunity to increase economic development opportunities for this state through the port. In closing, it has been 27 years since we've done anything to address this. The more we delay, the more we pay in lost opportunities and in human lives. I urge you to support this legislation and rebuild Alabama. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Page. Next, we have an opponent, Mr. Allen Williams.
Thank you, committee. I appreciate this opportunity. I dressed this way today. I had a suit laid out, but I'm speaking on behalf of the people of Chilton County who are traveling every day to Montgomery or Birmingham to make a living. This tax is directly going to impact the working people of this county. I myself have a small trucking company. It's going to impact me. But I got to thinking last night, this is going to impact the people of this county and this state who have to drive long distances to work every day. This state has not done accountability in making sure that our dollars are spent well on our roads. I travel the 48 states. We have other states whose roads are better than ours. And when I say better, they've been better for years. We repave over and over roads that other states do not repave. Why? We're spending money we shouldn't be spending on paving. We should have paid this money early, got the job we're paying for. So why are we not having accountability already? Senator Pooh spoke to this earlier, accountability. I've been involved in politics in this state since the early 70s. No accountability has ever been given for dollars spent of my tax dollar. I want to see some accountability for my dollars. Everybody in this state wants to see accountability for their dollars. How many of you have spoken to people in your districts personally who are in favor or opposed? I have sort of a reputation in my county that I speak what I think. I have many followers in my county who have messaged me and replied to me opposing this tax for the same reason I just gave you, accountability. So I expect accountability from those who serve, not what we've been getting for years. 2016 was a turning point in this country. We elected a president who's not like any other. People spoke. You who got elected, the people spoke. We want to change. We want to change for the better. I agree we need infrastructure. We need better roads. We need better bridges. We need accountability first. And I would bet each of you and each of your cohorts in Senate and legislature campaigned on accountability. Thank you for your time, and I hope you vote no on this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Next, we have a supporter, Sarah Stokes.
Good morning, and thank you for letting me speak at this, and thank you for having a public hearing. My name is Sarah Stokes, and I am an attorney with the Southern Environmental Law Center. We have worked on transportation funding, not only in Alabama, but in our other sister states, Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee. And we support what you're trying to do, which is to try to stop the gap of our bleeding infrastructure. As we ask more, or if we ask more from taxpayers, though, we also have to ask more from ALDOT. And I think accountability has been said 1,000 times. One of the things that has to be done, or we ask you to do, is to ask ALDOT to rank projects based on objective criteria, such as get them to grade the projects based on maintenance needs, safety concerns, economic development, how they affect the environment, congestion alleviation. And once they are graded, then they can be put in a rank and in a prioritization list. And actually, you guys can decide whether or not ALDOT is spending the money the way it should be spent based on their prioritization list, or not. And you can look at the work that actually ALDOT has done. So the work doesn't go through a black box, but you can see the formula and see how different things are ranked. Virginia, it's required to be done in Virginia. This is required in North Carolina. This is required in Georgia. This is required in Tennessee. Alabama has not yet passed anything that requires ALDOT to prioritize projects based on objective, need-based criteria. The bill now only requires ALDOT to prioritize projects based on economic development in one list and congestion needs in another list. It leaves out safety, it leaves out maintenance projects, and while those two are important, all the projects need to be looked at across the board, bridges, for example. And I think there are examples across the country where you can all think of where the media or the citizens have called projects boondoggles or pork barrel projects. This requirement of making ALDOT do list projects takes the politics out of the choice that ALDOT's making, and it also gives cover for ALDOT. So ALDOT can say, this is the formula that we used, and this is why I have to build this project because I have ranked it this way. It gives cover not only for ALDOT, but it also lets you as the legislature have more transparency, and it lets the citizens understand how you came to that project. So it makes fiscal sense to rank projects based on objective criteria, and so we ask that you take the black box out of the decision-making of ALDOT and ask for a prioritization criteria.
Thank you. Next, we have an opponent, Hannah Ford.
Hey, I'll just be brief. I'm here by myself, unpaid citizen who opposes this gas tax. I think you've heard from your people, and that's what I'm asking you to do. We got a room full of lobbyists here. Who are you elected to serve? Lobbyists alone or the people of your district? And I'm just asking you to vote your district. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have a supporter, Kurt Chafin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kurt Chafin, and I am the Policy Director for the Alabama Rivers Alliance. We're a statewide organization trying to get better water, get better protection for our rivers here in the state. I'm going to echo a lot of what Mrs. Stokes said a second ago. If you take one thing away from my comments right here, it's going to be something that she said. It's 2 words: objective criteria. Unless we prioritize the projects that need to be built, the ones that need to be repaired, we won't really be rebuilding Alabama. We'll be doling out pork money and funding pet projects. So the JTC, as Honorable Representative Mr. Poole talked about, that's an amazing start. That oversight, especially in the Senate version, that looks at ecological needs and looks at some of the other things that Ms. Stokes said, that's a great start. But we need to go a little bit further. And that's why I'm asking you to pass an amendment or to consider this while you're voting to include this objective criteria. So I'm a river guy. I know a little bit about bridges. I know a little bit about rivers. They're actually very connected. The runoff from these paved roads goes straight into our rivers. And that may not seem like a big deal, but that runoff, the dirt that comes off the roads, all that litter, that's actually the biggest impairment to our rivers in Alabama. So this is a tremendous opportunity for us to do the work on the front end to make sure that we aren't harming our rivers. You know, my granddaddy used to say, measure twice, cut once. Now, in legal terms, that is including objective criteria. I just want to give a very quick example. We don't, at the Rivers Alliance, like to oppose development. That's an absolute last resort for us. But this summer, on the Cahaba Beach Road in Birmingham, Alabama, we had to make that decision because this road was being built directly adjacent to our drinking water supplies. Now, I'm not saying that this funding would go to support things like that, but it opens the door for misuse of funds. The JTC, a lot of good people are on there. ALDOT, so many good people work for them, but we don't know what it's going to be like in 5 years. We don't know who's going to be there, who's going to be making our decisions. But if we do the work on the front end, then we can make sure that roads are responsible, our development is safe, and that our rivers are protected. I'm tired of swimming in chocolate milk colored water. I'm tired of kayaking around litter. If we have an amendment to this bill or edit this bill to include that objective criteria that Ms. Stokes mentioned, that our other states, Mr. Poole did an excellent job of saying we have to embrace, we're competing with our sister states. Well, they've done this, and we need to do it too. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have the final opponent, Mr. Ben Harrison.
Hello, Representative Greer, members of the committee. My name is Ben Harrison. I am a Limestone County Commissioner in District 4. I want to come and talk to you and I thank Governor Ivey. I thank you for trying to address this issue. I know firsthand the serious funding issues that we have. I did the calculations on my road system. I only have about 20% of the funds that I need to provide my citizens, my constituents, the roads that they want. But I've been also working for the past 3 or 4 years to try to get people to look at what I consider to be very serious cost issues on how our monies are handled and just what I consider to be waste. I grew up, my training was in process engineering. I'm a chemical engineer, have a degree from Auburn, and I worked in manufacturing. And we did everything we could to improve the quality and lower the cost. That was the mantra that I was given, and I was trained very well in that. And I try to apply those principles to this system that we have. And what I want to do, and like I say, I've been trying to work behind the scenes for the last 3 or 4 years to get people to look at these issues. And I quite frankly, I'm at my wit's end, and I don't know any other way to do it. And it's not comfortable for me to stand before you and this group and talk about these issues, but I think, and if I'm wrong, I'll come up before you and tell you that I'm wrong. But these things, I've just listed 5 brief ones, and I know I'm going to run out of time. But number one issue is we need to find out why our current mixed designs that we're using on roads do not last half the life that they should last. I talked with engineers around the whole Southeast, GDOT, Tennessee. You know, why are they not lasting? I have my own ideas, and I've talked to the technical people at ALDOT. They don't know, okay? I met with them, and they say, we don't know if it's crude from Venezuela or from Brazil. We don't know if we've reduced the asphalt content 20%. We don't know if we're just extracting more gas and diesel from our oils and that we're getting the bottoms out of that and it's lower quality. We don't know. But my friends, I want to tell you right now, this issue needs to be put to bed. Because when you're only getting half the life out of your formulations, that is a huge cost impact. So, okay. The next one is, why do we have to design our structures for 100-year floods? I mean, I got structures that won't last 5 years. We've got to analyze the cost benefits of these things and whether or not it makes sense. Why are professional services, somebody's got to explain this to me. Why are professional services exempt from the competitive bid process? Why are they selected by qualifications and not by price in the design? Thank you, Committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next supporter is Mr. Sonny Brasfield, Association of County Commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Sonny Brasfield. I represent the 361 or 62 county commissioners who maintain a massive system of infrastructure in our state. Almost 61,000 miles of roads are maintained by Alabama's 67 governments. How long is that? That's from here to Los Angeles, California, and back 15 times. We maintain almost 9,000 county bridges, and Representative Poole gave you a quick snapshot about the condition of those bridges. It has been since 1992 since the county government's had an increase in the amount of revenue they receive, the investment that's made by the public in this infrastructure system, because the county commissions do not have the ability to address that themselves. We are partners with the state of Alabama in maintaining a system that is safe and will support economic development in our state. Representative Poole, and on behalf of the counties, I want to thank him for his leadership and insight in sponsoring this legislation, as well as Governor Ivey for being out front. I don't think today is a surprise to anyone who's been involved in paying attention in the last 3 years. We know it's time that this issue must be addressed. We are at a place in county government where we are running a 2019 system of transportation on 1992 revenue. Representative Poole said he was in junior high school when the legislation was increased the last time. It's easy for me to remember. I was in a hospital in Montgomery, Alabama, for the birth of our first child on Sunday. I left my wife and my son there and came into the building that we stand in now and helped move the bill out of the House of Representatives on the following Tuesday. My son will be 27 years old in June. That puts in context for me how long it has been. The numbers are staggeringly big for us. To get county roads on a 15-year recycling program, we need an additional $380 million a year. To replace the almost 45% of our bridges that are more than 50 years old, we need $2.3 billion. Those numbers are staggering. I will quickly read you the numbers for each one of your counties to get us on a 15-year recycling program and to replace all the bridges that are 50 years old or older. In Lauderdale, $16.5 million. Baldwin, $17.1. Sumter County, $5.2. Mobile, $14.4 million. Limestone, $13.3 million. Jefferson County, $26.7. Etowah County, $9.8 million. Marshall County, $13 million. Morgan County, $12.7 million. And Coleman County, $16.5. That's the bare minimum to get us on the minimum schedule. I urge you to move this bill to the floor of the House of Representatives. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Next, we have as a supporter, Mr. Keith Johnson.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for having this hearing today. I know it's on short notice and you're having to work hard to get this bill done, but I appreciate everything you're doing here today. My name is Keith Johnson. I'm managing attorney of the Southern Environmental Law Center in Birmingham, Alabama. And my intent today is to talk about one very specific piece of this legislation, and that's the extremely high flat taxes imposed on battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. I want to thank members of the committee and others who worked to get that initial tax down from $250 for battery electric vehicles down to $200, and for the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, $125 to $100. But that reduction, even with that reduction, this is still one of the highest taxes levied on battery electric vehicles in the country. For instance, in Tennessee, they charge a flat tax of $100 for electric vehicles, and there's no tax on plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. Virginia, Georgia, there's no tax on plug-in hybrid electric vehicles as well, and those are vehicles that use some combination of battery power and combustion engine power. In Mississippi, there's a $150 tax on battery electric vehicles and a $75 tax on the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. So you can see that this is the high, if we go forward with this, this will be one of the highest taxes levied on electric vehicles in the country. So we've done some calculations, and we looked at this and we compared it to a typical sedan, a Toyota Camry that you might drive, and compared that with what the taxes would be for electric vehicles. And the owner of a Toyota Camry who drives an average mileage per year for these cars, with this proposal would pay about $118 per year. But you can see the battery electric vehicle owner would pay the $200 plus whatever taxes are imposed upon the electricity that he uses in his battery electric vehicle. So we see this as sort of a double taxation, and with the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, a triple taxation in some instances. So we know that electric vehicles need to pay their fair share for the maintenance and upkeep of our roads and bridges, but these need to be rationally related to the actual costs that the cars impose on our roads and bridges. We think that this sends the wrong message, having the highest tax levied on these types of vehicles, because Alabama is now a car manufacturing state. We rely on car manufacturing. The wave of the future is electric vehicles. And for us to be imposing this high of a tax on electric vehicles would be send the wrong message to those manufacturers and those suppliers who are coming into our state. So in closing, I would say that we're not against the fair share of taxes on electric vehicles, but we think that should be lowered in a range of $75 to $100 for electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Next, we have a supporter, Mr. David Cole, VCA.
Good morning. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much. Committee members, thank you for being here today. Chairman Poole, thank you so much for your leadership. I believe this is about year 4 that he's been working on this bill. My name is David Cole with the Business Council of Alabama, here representing over 3,000 businesses and over 750,000 working Alabamians that I would venture to say a lot of which are in every district scattered throughout the state. The economic viability of the state of Alabama is what's at stake here, and we have an opportunity to provide the next generation with a lot of opportunity down the road. Another opportunity that we have is to change the public perception that's out there today. We've heard a lot about accountability. Let's show the public that this money is going where you say it's going, and that is gravel, asphalt, and concrete for bridges. And I truly believe that once the public sees where this money is going, we have an opportunity to change that perception. The Business Council of Alabama is 110% behind this piece of legislation. It's critical that we do everything that we can to fix our crumbling roads and bridges and to deepen and widen our ports. And by doing that, we feel 100% confident that it is going to encourage businesses to flourish in Alabama. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Next, we have Mr. Philip Wiedmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Philip Wiedmeyer. I'm president and chairman of the Alabama Clean Fuels Coalition. We're a nonprofit organization that promotes the use of alternative fuels in the transportation sector in order to decrease our dependence on foreign oil. Even in today's lower oil price environments, we still, as a nation, import about 20% of the oil that we use in this country. And 70% of the oil that we use is used in the transportation sector. So alternative fuels gives us an opportunity to diversify our fuel supply, increase energy independence, energy security, and these fuels are all cleaner burning than gasoline or diesel, so there's less tailpipe emissions. There are 5 alternative fuels. We're a fuel-neutral organization. We promote the use of all of them. Ethanol, biodiesel, electricity, propane, and natural gas, all as transportation fuels. So I can't say any more eloquently than Representative Poole did about the need for this legislation in Alabama and how important it is to our economy. And we fully support this effort to move this state forward and address those needs. And then I would like to speak specifically about the electric vehicle provisions in the bill. One person stated that they're some of the highest. Well, our neighboring state, Georgia, is at $200. but they don't have a grant program associated with it. And that's one thing unique and first in the nation about this approach, is that it would provide a grant program that would help build out the charging infrastructure needed to expand the market for electric vehicles. Let me give you a few facts in comparison of that. There's almost 20,000 charging stations in the United States. We have 271 in Alabama. Our neighboring states, Georgia, 2,325. Florida, 2,990. Tennessee, 1,069. Mississippi, 149. We're only better than Mississippi. Electric vehicles are a big part of the future of the transportation sector, and the Alabama is benefiting from that. Mercedes is investing $1 billion to build a battery plant in the state. And we need to help support the infrastructure that's needed to expand the market for that. That's one of the main barriers to people purchasing more electric vehicles, is range anxiety. They're afraid they won't be able to get to their destinations and they would run out of power. Most of the charging is going to take place at home, but it's those unexpected trips that create worries for people. And more public infrastructure, charging infrastructure, is needed. So thank you, Representative Poole, for your leadership on this issue, and I urge every one of you to support this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Frank Philgo, Alabama Truckers Association.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Frank Philgo with the Alabama Trucking Association. My association represents over 700 trucking-related companies in the state of Alabama. We haul 80% of all the freight in the state of Alabama, and we, in fact, are the wheels of industry. One thing you need to know about our industry: when a truck pulls up to the pump, we don't simply put 20 gallons of gasoline in it to fill it up. It takes about 300 gallons of diesel. That's a lot of diesel. So you might think that I'm standing here in opposition to this bill, but we strongly support this bill and this legislation. We do not consider it a tax increase. We consider it an investment in the state of Alabama. One of the major problems with my industry is if we don't have the roads, we cannot get our freight from point A to point B on time in a safe manner. Most of the monies in Alabama are spent merely to shore up the existing roads. We need new lanes in the state of Alabama, and this bill will help us get that. As to the Mobile port, we are in favor of expansion of that. Why? Because that means more freight for us to haul, and also for the better of the economy in the state of Alabama. In closing, Mr. Chairman, I just want to say that this is a sound investment, that my industry strongly supports this, and we hope that you will make this investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Philgo. Next, we have Greg Cochran with the League Municipalities.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Greg Cochran with the League of Municipalities. We represent over 450 municipalities across this state. Those cities represent over 60% of the citizens that live in our state, that live, work, and play in those municipalities on a daily basis. We are in full support of this legislation and this investment back into our infrastructure. We understand the importance of it. We have worked with the Speaker, McCutcheon, with Pro Tem of the Senate, Del Marsh, with the sponsor, Representative Bill Poole, and the Governor to put forth a framework. Over the last 3 years, we've met over 30 times to build a framework of a legislation that would begin to address the issue before you today. It's not perfect in that it's not big enough, but it does begin to address the issues before you. We crafted the municipal portion of this bill to represent every municipality. The monies coming to the municipalities will be divided up Each municipality will receive a fair share, and the rest of the money will be divided up based on population. We wanted to ensure that every citizen that's participating in this investment sees some return in their community for their hard-earned money. We believe this is the way we should move forward. We ask you to support this legislation. The League of Municipalities Executive Committee endorsed this proposal. We passed a resolution doing so, and we've had several of our municipalities have endorsed this as well. Thank you for your time. Thank you for hearing us today.
Thank you, Greg. Next, we have Mr. Matt Durden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, Matthew Durden, representing Alabama Farmers Federation. I want to give you a little background about the Alabama Farmers Federation. We're approaching our 100th anniversary. We were formed to represent the farmers in rural Alabama so they could stay on their farms and work, and while we could come to Montgomery and pass reasonable and responsible legislation for them. We don't get to wake up every morning at the Farmers Federation and pick and choose what we're going to be for. We're a policy grassroots organization. Several years ago, we passed a policy that states we support fair and equitable funding for rural roads and bridges and farm-to-market roads. Our president has been meeting with Governor Ivey on this piece of legislation. We think that this meets all of the criteria that we need to support our policy. Also, the Port of Mobile is very important to agriculture. Poultry and timber production flows through that port. Deeper, wider ports allows more that can be sent through this state to increase our poultry production. We're number 3 in poultry production in the state of Alabama. This might can move us up the chart a little bit. I'd like to also say that one thing that hasn't been mentioned up here, rural Alabama is drying up, crumbling. One of the ways that we can survive is through infrastructure, broadband, the Rural Broadband Initiative. One thing that we need to address is President Trump's infrastructure plan includes broadband. We're going to need matching dollars somehow or another to get broadband to rural Alabama. We appreciate your support, appreciate Chairman Poole's leadership on this, appreciate this committee's vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We have one final supporter, and that's Mr. Rick Brown, Alabama Retail Association.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee members. With the Alabama Retail Association, represent retailers, and we move goods around this state every single day, and we have to do something about our roads. It's time to do something about our roads. We move stuff around the state every day, and we would greatly appreciate your support of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the public hearing. Next, we'll go into the actual legislation and call Mr. Representative Poole back. First bill is going to be House Bill 1, which pertains to the Permanent Joint Transportation Committee, making some technical corrections. Representative Poole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is House Bill 1. I spoke on it briefly a few minutes ago. I'm going to highlight a couple components of it. This is a critical bill. I know that you all know that. We've emphasized that, and you have it before you. I'm going to be glad to answer questions, but I've also asked Senator Chambliss, who has worked with me and really been instrumental in drafting this. I should say I have worked with him. He is a civil engineer and brings a lot of subject matter expertise to the table, and I very much appreciate his leadership, and I may ask him to assist in any questions so that we can provide full, thorough answers to the committee and to the public. But just to kind of overview, the Joint Transportation Committee is and will continue to be a standing joint committee of the House and Senate. The membership will be addressed within the bill, and it is a currently existing committee, as you know, but just so all the public knows. But we're amending the statute to strengthen the powers and the authorities of that committee, and we're going to expect that committee to do its job. And it's going to be critical that committee does its job in terms of oversight and accountability. The committee is going to have the ability to review, advise ALDOT as it relates to a number of areas, and it will have amendment authority. So ALDOT prepares the statewide transportation improvement program, called the STIP in short. It is a fluid plan. It is posted in public, and it is updated several times each year. That plan, the STIP plan, will be submitted to the JTC for review. The JTC will have an opportunity to comment on that plan and to offer amendments to that plan. And that's a critical point. And we've talked about objective criteria, and I want to address that in a minute. And I'm going to make a note to do that while I'm on the thought process, because I think good points have been raised, and there have been some discussions on that I'd like to disclose. But this committee can review, advise, and offer amendments to the state STIP plan. This committee can also review and advise and influence the Transportation Department's budget requests. And that's one of the significant roles of the legislature, as we certainly know in this building. The State Department of Transportation will be required to submit its annual budget request to the JTC directly, not just to the general fund chairman and committee, but also to the JTC. The JTC will have an opportunity to input relative to that budget, and it will do so based upon a review and evaluation of the performance of ALDOT relative to its internal mechanisms, its performance related to the STIP. ALDOT will be required to submit a number of reports that are outlined in the bill that will allow comparisons to the planning and the projections versus the actual performance. So we want to establish clear mechanisms to present and study and amend plans, but also scrutinize performance, because without performance, a plan is really irrelevant, and it's all about performance. So the JTC will have the authority, just as this committee does, to call witnesses, to call ALDOT representatives, to call county commissioners, to call engineers, whomever they want to determine what we need to do better in Alabama in regards to stretching every taxpayer dollar for maximum return on investment. And that will be the duty, mission, and charge of the JTC. It'll be an extension of the duty, mission, and charge of this entity, our body, the legislature, and we need to perform that function. And all of us, as we contemplate the proposals ahead, need to commit ourselves to that, because as a number of folks have said today, we have to earn that trust. We have to be able to establish that it's being done, and that's on us. And that'll be our responsibility. And if we don't do it, then shame on us. But this will provide an additional mechanism to do that, so the public can see it, so the public can participate in it, so the light of day will be shined, so that criteria can be reviewed. We've been discussing, and I think you will see, anticipate, if we are successful in moving these proposals to the floor, allowing the JTC to study and determine what the objective criterion that folks have talked about today need to be. So before we get ahead of ourselves, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a subject matter expert. Let's get the experts, let's get the professional assistants, and let's allow the JTC, with public input, to establish those objective criterion, because I agree with some points that have been made today, and I acknowledge those, and I thank those comments for coming forward. Let's empower the JTC to do that in an appropriate manner with subject matter experts and with public input, and I think and I hope that we'll see that as a component of that proposal. But with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to answer any questions as it relates to HB 1.
Thank you, Representative Poole. Any members of the committee have any questions pertaining to HB 1?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Cochran. Crawford. I'm sorry. Okay, we have a move for a favorable report.
Second.
Second. Any other questions? All in favor of giving House Bill 1 a favorable report, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise? No? Okay, House Bill 1 is given a favorable report. Thank you. Next, we'll call House Bill 2, which is the infrastructure funding legislation. Representative Poole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I anticipate that this one may not go so smoothly. I've talked about some highlights, and I've talked about some reasons, and I've talked a little bit about the need. I want to talk more specifically about this proposal and the details of the same. There are really a couple fundamentals of the proposal. There's the EV components that I will discuss. There are the funding mechanisms that I will discuss. There are the restrictive components that I will discuss. And the port funding, which I didn't talk about earlier. Some others have alluded to that, and I'd like to talk about that in more specificity. But in terms of outlining that bill, in terms of the EV fees, for the first time, this will recognize in Alabama that the EVs and the EV hybrids, and I may not be saying that exactly properly, but I hope everybody knows what I mean by that, are using our roads, and that is the wave of the future. We all know that. We're going to have more EVs. We want more EVs, and that's going to happen as more products come to market, and we're going to be a leader in the state in that regard, and as consumers react to that and purchase those. Those vehicles use our roads and bridges just like gas and diesel combustion vehicles, and so consequently, we need to have fairness and equity in terms of contributing to the maintenance and expansion of that transportation infrastructure system. What this program does, in addition to that, though, is tries to anticipate forward the fact that we know EV vehicles are coming. And so there is an additional fee that is a component of this to support an infrastructure program to help facilitate and prepare for EV vehicles hitting our roads in the forms of charging stations and related infrastructure. It's great if we have EV vehicles, but it's not great if there's nowhere to charge them. It's great if EV vehicles are traveling our roads across our state lines, but they've got to have charging opportunities. This fund will be accessible to public entities, private entities, so we begin to put the infrastructure in place in advance, for once, in preparation for that. So there are some additional components, and those are addressed in the bill. In terms of the motor fuel taxes, this proposal calls for a 6-cent per gallon increase on October 1, 2019, followed by 2 cents in 2020 and 2 cents in 2021. Those are phased to try to recognize that citizens, businesses, industry paying this, a phase-in helps absorb those increases, but also allows us to get our mechanisms in place to spend the dollars as wisely and as prudently as possible. In terms of distribution of the revenue, under this proposal, the state will receive approximately 66% of the funding. That is one of the lowest distribution allocations in the southeast of state relative to local. Counties 25% and municipals 8.33%. And as I move through the bill, let me also point out, within the state share, there are 2 grant programs that are very intentionally crafted and designed to assist the local entities to leverage those dollars further by accessing state match dollars. So a fair amount of the state match dollars are available to match and draw down on local projects. So we want to infuse and braid together state resources and local resources, and we want to empower local governmental entities to stretch their dollars as far as possible. There are methodologies in this proposal that allow locals to pool their dollars, to collaborate on projects that may cross an invisible boundary line but affect both a county and a city, or 2 cities that are adjacent, or 2 cities that are proximate, or 2 counties that are adjacent. I think I've made my point, but we want to make sure that we are stretching dollars. We are working together across those invisible boundaries, collaborating with state. Sometimes, or as often the case, when locals can collaborate with the state, we can pull down federal. These dollars on the local level are available to pull down federal match. So we want to stretch this dollar every inch we can make it stretch so that we can achieve maximum return on that investment. And when I say maximum return on investment, I want to stop and make a point there too. There is no better investment that we can make on behalf of the taxpayers of the state than our capital asset system that is made up by our transportation infrastructure. None. This isn't a program, this isn't an idea, this isn't a pilot. The road and bridge system in the state of Alabama is the taxpayer's most valuable capital asset, period. There is nothing else that is even close. The value, if you monetize it, is staggering. The taxpayers have paid for it. We've got to maintain it, and that's critical, and there is no better investment. In terms of the use of the new dollars, I spoke about that earlier. I will not belabor that point, but as you review this proposal, and I know that all of you have, we've had a lot of discussions, there are restrictions on uses. There are prohibitions on uses. We want this to be tight, clear, auditable, transparent. We want this to go to roads and bridges and nothing else. And we want the citizens of the state to be able to have satisfaction and confidence in that. Relative to a growth mechanism, this proposal, a number of states around the country have recognized the need to try to keep up with costs of inflation, rising population, more vehicles on the roads, relative to having some kind of growth mechanism. We have surveyed the nation. We have looked at every one. We have seen the ones that have worked. We have seen the ones that haven't. We have derived the lessons from those and proposed what I believe to be the most conservative, simple, clean growth mechanism in this country as it relates to the potential of a growth mechanism. And it is as follows, 3 points, 3 simple points. It will index or factor off of the National Highway Cost of Construction Index that is prepared by the Federal Highway Association. So that is an index that measures the cost to maintain and build roads and bridges in our country. It can only and will only calculate and adjust every 2 years, not annually, every 2 years, and it can only go up or down by 1 penny at each adjustment. And there have been periods, if you model this backwards, that it would go down. And there may be periods before that it will go down, it will not move, or it may be adjust up by a penny. That will depend on our economy, will depend on the cost of construction. Right now, we have steel tariffs in place that are exponentially driving up costs. Those tariffs come off, prices go down, it would adjust down. But this is a reflection of market realities that exist. They exist, they're undeniable. And it's an effort to try to responsibly, but also very carefully anticipate and be able to react off of those market realities. The port funding, I think everybody is generally aware and familiar with how important the Port of Mobile, the state of Alabama's port, is to this state and our economy. It is one of the most valuable assets in the state that we have. We have an opportunity, based upon the hard work of our federal delegation, led in this instance by Senator Shelby, who has not only lined up federal dollars, he has managed to move the local match from the typical 50-50 to draw down federal funds to a 25-75. We need to come up with 25% of the funding for this prospective project that has been approved and is ready to go. That project will deepen and widen the shipping channel and the turn basin. By virtue of doing that, we will be able as a state to bring more ships in and out of our port and larger ships in and out of that port. We will substantially, as a consequence of that, increase the volume of containers and other goods coming and going. That benefits every community in this state. Whether you're stocking your shelves at a retail location, or you're exporting chicken or agricultural materials, or you're bringing in materials for the manufacturing line that then leaves in a finished product to go back out to the port for export, we've got to have it. And this project will give us a very significant competitive advantage over all of our competing ports across the Gulf. It will make us, I think, only one of 2 ports on the Gulf that can service the post-Panamax size larger container ships. That gives us an advantage over New Orleans, Galveston, and all the other Gulf ports. What that also does is it lowers the cost of goods in our state because we can get things in and out more direct and cheaper. So this benefits everybody in every community in the state of Alabama. We do not at present have the dollars to match that project, and those match dollars are provided for in this proposal. But I want to be clear too, the dollars provided for the match are restricted very carefully. They're restricted in terms of the use, so these dollars can end up in some other project or some other component. Has to be for the ship, for the channel. They're limited in amount, so we've capped. We know what our match obligation is, so we're not going to allow any dollars beyond the match obligation to go forth. And we're limiting the time of the indebtedness that it will take to pull down that match. At the conclusion of that financial obligation, the dollars devoted to support that program and that match will revert back into the Rebuild Alabama Fund and under the normal distribution factor. So we'll roll right back in to be spread back across every corner of the state of Alabama as it relates to the distribution mechanisms that are in place. Yeah, I could go on and on. I've met with all of you about this proposal. I can get more specific on any particular issue. I look forward to any questions that you have. But at the end of the day, I ask you, members of this committee, to move this to the floor of the House of Representatives so that we can have a full debate on this issue and hear from every member of our body, our elected body, and have the opinions and views of every constituent citizen of this state expressed in that forum and with those opportunities. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Okay, on House Bill 2, do any members of the committee have any questions for Representative Poole? Representative Wheeler.
Use your microphone.
Is that it? Is that better? I said without objection, I'd like to make some opening comments and then have some questions I'd like to follow up with. First of all, I'd like to compliment Governor Ivey and her bold initiative. She's put everything at stake on this issue, and I appreciate that. I also want to compliment the leadership. They've taken an enormous amount of time to talk to us as freshmen, both the Speaker and Majority Leader. I spoke to the Speaker before 9 o'clock Tuesday morning, and he took a lot of time to address my concerns. But more importantly, or equally as importantly, I want to compliment you, Chairman Poole. You've demonstrated to me a statesmanship that I've not seen before. You've invested tons of time and energy in this process, and I appreciate that. And regardless of my ultimate vote on that, I don't want to diminish the effort you've put into this. You stated earlier that in 1992, the last time we had this increase, you were in junior high school. I like to draw a contrast. In 1992, I was working in Washington, D.C., lobbying the National Energy Policy Act, 32 title bill, billions of dollars. I say that to compliment public education because between the time I was in junior high school and you were in junior high school, you obviously got a lot more smarter than I did.
I don't know. I'm standing here in front of you. I'm not sure that's...
The other thing I'd like to note here is I'm a member of the freshman class. I think this is the largest turnover in the legislature in the state of Alabama since early 70s. And I've heard a story told that Rankin Fife was the speaker at that time. And he saw all these freshmen coming in, and he called them all to Montgomery for a pre-session talk. And as you remember, in his age, he had a little palsy and a little shake in his voice. And he says, "Boys, from time to time, I'm going to need you." And some freshman legislator from, I believe, Huntsville said, "Well, Mr. Speaker, when you're right, we'll be with you." And Rankin said, "Hell, son, if I'm right, I don't need you." Let me start off by asking a couple of questions. First, in Section 8, I believe, in the latest draft, page 20, Section D, moving over to Section E on page 21. You with me?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Sorry, I thought you were looking. We're talking about the creation of two funds. The first is a $10 million fund an annual grant program, and then we continue over to the Alabama Transportation Rehabilitation and Improvement Program 2. As I read that, we've talked a lot about in our caucus meetings about transparency, accountability, transparency. At the end of Section E, it talks about creating a fund no less than $30 million and no more than $50 million, but it shall be at the full the discretion of the director of ALDOT. I don't see any reference to the Joint Transportation Committee and the accountability and transparency that we've talked about before. Would you elaborate on that?
Sure, I'd be glad to. So let me explain the purpose and intent of that program. This is an A-Trip 2 program. So all funding distributed by virtue of that program will be guided pursuant to the A-Trip 2 guidelines as addressed in the bill. And this is a pay-as-you-go mechanism. So A-Trip 1, as we all kind of think about it and consider it, was a bond proposal. Those bonds down supported local projects across the state. That debt now being paid by the state via ALDOT, about $66 million a year. This is a pay-go. The A-Trip 2 committee will be established and will have input and involvement in decisions, and will establish the application mechanisms, what types of projects they're going to fund, what the criterion will be. That makeup's addressed in the bill. The reason there's a range, one of the reasons from the 30 to 50 million, there's a couple reasons. One is when we're not at full phase-in of this, then ALDOT, relative to its share, cannot absorb diverting 50 million. In other words, when we're in year one and ALDOT has not realized the full potential revenue as contemplated by the bill, they've got to have sufficient funding to do all the other things that they have obligations to do. So that's one reason for the fund. The other is you just don't know what issues are going to be out there in the future relative to revenues or obligations or projects, so on and so forth. So the director of ALDOT has the discretion of where to land within the 30, 50 million, but it's the A-Trip 2 committee that will be involved in the substantive decision-making processes.
So it's the A-Trip committee rather than JTC?
Yes, in this as it relates to the distribution of these funds, yes.
Okay. Moving on to the next topic. Excuse me. The reduction in the registration fee for EVs. I think it started at $250 and we're now at $200. Would you give me a little background or reasoning why that reduction? And let me say this. Well, I'll reserve that comment. Go ahead.
It relates to the grant program. How aggressive do we want to be as a state in terms of trying to get some infrastructure in place? And by that, I don't mean roads and bridges. I mean charging locations, charging resources, charging components. How aggressive do we want to be in ramping that funding up and getting that in? And just to be quite candid, when we introduced the bill initially, there was a lot of reaction to that amount, and so we've dialed it in out of respect and recognition of a lot of the comments and opinions we received to try to land at a place that would be more appropriate relative to the owners of those vehicles.
Excuse me, my understanding there's about 2,300 electric vehicles in the state of Alabama currently.
I think it's about 23,000 if I
1,000?
recall correctly, and I got a lot of numbers in my head, so
Yeah, me and you both, especially you. I recently saw a report from, I believe it was developed by Bank of America, that said by 2050, 90% of the passenger vehicles would be EVs. My opinion is that industry has been subsidized for 3 decades. They use the roads just like combustion vehicles do. I would not necessarily be opposed to putting it back at the original amount. I understand that might not be possible, but just that's my opinion.
Okay.
One
Thank
final
you.
question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I believe Act 333 in 2017 was passed to implement a tax structure on alternative fuels. And this went into effect on October 1 of last year. This is dealing with liquefied petroleum gas and compressed natural gas. effective October 1 of 18, the tax on that was 8 cents per gasoline gallon equivalent, and it will stay that way until September 30th of 2023. However, I've been told that if there's a adjustment to the gas tax that we're discussing, right now, that 8 cent would go up to whatever the taxes we pass. Is that factual?
I do not know the answer to that question. I'd be glad to work with you to determine an accurate answer, and if we need to address that, I'll be glad to work with you.
And Mr. Chairman, do we have an estimate of the revenue that's being generated by that tax?
Can you ask that question again?
I was asking, do we have an estimate? I spoke with Fiscal Services earlier. I was looking for amount of tax that has been generated, amount of revenue that's been generated since that went into effect in October. If we don't have that now, if you would provide that at the future, I would be happy.
Okay.
I'll work with you and LFO representative to try to get that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wheeler. Any other questions to Representative Poole? Representative Hollis?
I do think that we need better roads. I have popped the tire to myself. I also think that we need to have a full body debate on this. I just want it to be noted that I am very uncomfortable with this bill. Some of my concerns are the stated income constituents, the less fortunate constituents. And this bill has come up so fast to it's really not giving, and I'm gonna speak for myself, it really has not given me the opportunity to reach out to my constituents like I would like to get more of their opinions. But I'm going to work on that. I have more concerns that I will address with you, Representative Poole. And one of my questions here today is, what percentage will the disadvantaged business enterprise would receive?
The proposal as it stands now refers to the DBE, I think, guidelines and regulations, as I recall, and I'm trying to flip to the point, that are adopted and administered or advised out of the Federal Highway Association. So my recollection off the top of my head is that we're made clear and very purposefully incorporated those provisions into this proposal. And my recollection is they're based off of those federal guidelines that are used on the federal level and related to federal projects. But I'll be glad certainly to continue to have any discussion with you as it relates to that.
So right now, we don't have a percentage?
There's not a percentage in this proposal. There's not a hard percentage, no.
Okay. And another question that I have on the Transportation Rehabilitation and Improvement Program Committee, will there be any Democrats on that committee?
Those are appointees. Those are appointees of the Lieutenant Governor, Senate Pro Tem, House Speaker, 3 appointments of the governor, at least 1 from local government. I know we had made a very intentional effort to have diversity clauses, and if we need to improve the language on that, I'm certainly glad to have that discussion, but those are appointments to be made prospectively.
Okay.
Is that all? Thank you, Representative Hollis. Representative Bracy, I believe you have a question.
Thank you. I was about to say good morning, but good afternoon.
It's going to be good night in a little while.
Yeah. I listened to the gentleman earlier. The quote by famous John Rogers is that he was going to love your bill to death over there. He was talking earlier. But I have a couple of quick questions. I know we talked about what the funding can be used for, and we talked about opportunities for matching funds to draw down from the states. I'm kind of thinking kind of specific about one of the cities in my district. I'm not sure why, but they don't have a local gas tax, and I'm not sure why the city never had one. I've talked to them about it before, but I see this as an opportunity that they could really use this revenue. And I was wondering, can cities or counties use this funding stream to float bonds to do larger projects, or would this be tied down? Because I heard you kind of talking about some things, but that was never really talked about.
That's a good question. Let me address that. And I'll address it on all three levels, just since we're on the topic. The Transportation Department is prohibited from committing more than 50% of the proceeds that it may receive for bond indebtedness for projects. Counties are prohibited in the same manner from committing more than 50% of the proceeds that they will respectively receive to bond indebtedness. The cities do not have that restriction in the proposal. They can they have a little broader leeway.
Okay. All right. Thank you. The next question is, you mentioned that I think it's about 7 states that's in similar situations to us. I think you mentioned 6 or 7. Somebody said 6 and somebody else said 7. But you also mentioned that other states used other revenue sources. Can you give me an idea of what other revenue sources other states are using?
There's a variety. For instance, I think some have used some offshore oil and gas, but I think that's proven very volatile and caused them some problems. Our neighbor to the west, Mississippi, has expanded gambling to start sports books and a number of those initiatives, and they've devoted gambling revenues from those enterprises to roads and bridges. So that's a couple just to name a few. But it's everything from adding to a registration tag to supplement to, I mean, it's a pretty extensive list in terms of the different potential revenue sources and the collection opportunities.
Okay. And my final question, I appreciate your effort on this. I've seen you work hard on this, Speaker McCutcheon, even before you, to try to get this done. But the one thing that I haven't really seen, and I've heard Chairman Klaus talk about this some, but I haven't really seen us explore other revenue sources outside of taxes. And I think it's important to explore other revenue sources, because even we know that this is not enough, right? I mean, we all know that if this bill passes, we still need more to get done the things that we need to get done. But I still don't hear conversation about other revenue sources. We know that from sitting on the general fund that we have those cliffs that come every couple of years, but we never discuss other revenue sources. We always revert back to taxes. Are we exploring any other revenue sources?
I'm glad to explore anything. I have considered personally every option that I can think of. I've talked about those with people. But the question at the end of the day, what can you possibly, trying to figure out what we can accomplish, what can we pass, what can we present, and I'm glad to continue to consider those and think about those, or think about ways in the future to supplement and draw this down potentially, whatever the case may be. But my personal opinion is I think this gives us the best chance to pass a proposal now to begin to address this problem, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Is that all? Thank you, Representative Bracy. I believe Representative McCampbell has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the recognition. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for being here today and for your hard work that you've done on this bill. I really want to make a statement, and then I'll get to my question. You and I are in the same delegation, and you and I and our delegation work very well together. And we work well together because we are men of honor, that if we say something to each other, and we don't, we don't play the games of I'm just going to say it. You've always been truthful with me, and I pray you feel I've always been truthful and straightforward with you. I've talked with Governor Ivey. I've talked with the Speaker. I've talked with you. And all have said that there are things that need to happen in this state. We all want it to be a bipartisan bill. That's what we are seeking. I want our caucuses to, instead of being an R and a D or a black caucus or whatever it may be, we need to rethink this thing and become an Alabama caucus, because it's all the people of Alabama that we are going to have to represent and we are serving. Every citizen in this state is going to have something in this bill if indeed it passes. They haven't, whether it's 10 cent, 15 cent, or $5,000, whatever the case may be. I want us to continue. Representative Bracey mentioned alternative sources. I want us to continue to not only just look at the alternative sources of rebuilding the infrastructure, but we also need to look at the alternative sources of rebuilding the relationships within our state. We need to rebuild the people of our state. There are things that will make good for them that we honestly need to begin to look at and address. With that, I have a question on page 21. I think it's addressed in section, I'm on the wrong page. Yes, addressed in section E and down through there. One of the key things, I'm from a rural area. I have Tuscaloosa, but I also have a whole lot of other counties too. So, and those other counties aren't as fortunate as Tuscaloosa. One of those counties has a population of less than 9,000 people for the whole county. So their resources are not that adequate. But we have roads in those counties that are actually falling apart without the local resources to do those roads. I know the A-Trip has a lot to do with state roads. And can you put it on record as to exactly how that will coincide with the local roads that our county commissioners will have to try and get paved? How will this help that situation?
This grant program, the A-Trip 2 program, pulls dollars and dedicates dollars out of the state distribution, for lack of a better word, and allows those dollars to be used for projects of local interest on state-maintained highway systems that may also include local roads and bridges essential to the projects. So in my judgment, what we want to accomplish here is have a committee that establishes some criteria. So how do we better connect, in this case rural, but in any case, our state highway system, integrate the local systems into it, and allow the respective entities to collaborate and work together relative to resources to integrate those systems. So these are dollars from the state allocation, but they got to be, so locals will have an opportunity to apply. That will be part of the A-Trip function, is to say, we propose this. So as I kind of envision an example, it may be a farm-to-market road whereby we are trying to get agriculture products down a local road to the state highway system, where then it goes down to the Port of Mobile for export. for instance. And so this would allow the integration of dollars, the pooling of dollars, the collaboration to allow state dollars to go onto that county road, but also to make sure, though, it's tying in a methodical and appropriate way with the state highway system.
And I want to make sure that you said this is A-Trip 2 and it's not A-Trip 1, because A-Trip 1 caused a huge problem in the sense that it was focused strictly, on tying together two state roads. If you had two state roads, one at one end and the other at the other end. And that is not going to always be the case when you get out in real rural Alabama. You're going to have a real farm-to-market road structure that only one of those roads will get it will tie into the state road. So I want to make sure that this is not going to be as limiting as what was A-Trip 1.
It is not. The statute, that's not the intent of the statute, doesn't say that in the statute, and that wouldn't be my intent as the drafter in working with, to try to put this together. And let me clarify, we're talking about farm to market, but we may also be talking about manufacturer to market. We don't know what those scenarios may be, but we want state dollars to be utilized to leverage projects of local interest in a collaborative fashion. So we may have county that can't fully afford, there may be a bridge there, and the county just doesn't have the dollars. Maybe the county can do the roadway, but not the bridge to connect. And so now we have a connectivity. We're trying to get something to and from and off the state system into the county areas, and you can collaborate. So in this case, you could apply to have the A-Trip to handle the bridge. Or I think there's really a myriad of opportunities, but that is the intent, to try to help tear down impediments to good projects.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Have any other questions? Representative Shedd.
Thank you. Did I understand you earlier, I think I understood you to say that the gas tax revenues are actually declining now, and at the same time, I think I heard you say then after that construction costs are escalating. Did I hear you right?
You did, and that is exactly the case that we are facing in Alabama. I referenced the numbers earlier. I'm glad to reference them again if you would like me to, but despite rising population and despite a drastic increase in the number of vehicles on the road, and I do have those statistics relative to the number of vehicles on the roads, I'll have to thumb through here and find it, our revenue is declining. And costs are increasing. So more population, more vehicles, higher costs, declining revenue. I don't think any of us doubt that that's not a sustainable model.
One other quick question. You don't have to give me specifics. We can get that. But does our neighboring states, how do we compare with our neighboring states on gasoline tax?
Alabama is dead last. Do we have a printout on that? Alabama is dead last with respect to our neighboring states. And I'll pass out. Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yes.
I'm going to put my lawyer hat on. May I approach the bench?
Yes, sir. Representative Poole.
As that chart makes its way around, that is the chart that illustrates our motor fuel revenue levels relative to other states in the southeast. And we are at the far end of that chart, and it's the bottom end. Mississippi is the closest to us at 18.4, but as discussed earlier, they're supplementing substantially with gambling revenue. Louisiana is next up the chain. They're having some issues regarding volatility, but you'll see where we stand on that chart, and you can all reach your own conclusions therefrom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have any other questions?
Representative Poole, I would like to commend you for taking this massive bill and undertaking, and also to the leadership for wanting to tackle something like this under the governor's direction. But one thing I would just like to point out, it's not really a question, but the accountability and the transparency is extremely important. A lot of constituents have said that they think there's so much waste in government. And you know as well as I do, it does exist, whether you're in government or if you're in business as well. But I would just like to say that one point that you made is that the only project that is in this that would be considered a special project is Mobile. But you said up front, there is nothing else that is in this bill for trading votes or letting anyone get anything special. We're all the same, and I think as a new representative, that's good to hear, because I guess in the perfect world, everybody's treated equally. And that's really the only point I wanted to make, and then just commend you of what you've done, because I know you've taken a lot of time away from your own personal business, and I know you would like to get back to that at some point. So,
Business and family. But let me comment on that for a moment, because you raised an important point, and let me kind of drive it home. Because I don't want to shy away from it, and I'm not going to make any excuses. I don't think any of us should. I mean, certainly there is some level of inefficiency and waste in ALDOT. And it should be our mission and purpose every day to squeeze that down every way we can. And in my time here, which I can only speak to, I think this legislature has done a very good job of that, and I could spend a long time right now talking about how we have reduced the size of government. We're at record low unemployment. We've reformed pension programs. Median salaries are up significantly across the state. We have reformed education and stabilized the budgets in the state. I mean, I can go on and on and on. We've worked tirelessly to do those things, but you could squeeze every penny out, and it's not going to solve the problem. So we've got to continue. That has to be our daily mission, but let's also be clear. This problem and the investment that's going to be required to address it is significant, and this is the only way we're going to move the needle.
Thank you, Representative Isbell. Any other questions? Representative Wheeler.
Chairman Poole, the chart you just passed out on the neighboring states, do you have an indication of when they have passed tax increases, how recently they have?
I do, and I'm going to refer to a separate chart and not cross over. So this may jump around a little bit, but these are states from the southeast, so are reflected on your chart, that have increased their motor fuel taxes since 2015. And states in the southeast that have increased since 2015. And I haven't cross-checked the two charts together, but South Carolina increased theirs in 2017, Tennessee in 2017, Georgia in 2015, North Carolina in 2015, Kentucky in 2015, and Florida in 2017. Only Alabama, Louisiana, and Mississippi have not increased ours in the period of time that we've been talking about. So those are southern states with conservative members that have passed it on a bipartisan basis, because I said earlier, the federal government is not going to come fix this. People are learning that. This is critical. This is about jobs and safety and economic development. If we don't have infrastructure, we're not going to have that. And we're growing. We're having economic success right now that's been hard-earned by our citizens, but we're going to stunt that. We are outstripping our infrastructure, and we're going to stunt our growth, and we're going to cut off the opportunities for our children that our parents gave us. And we're going to have to keep up, and we're going to have to compete on this playing field like we try to compete on all other playing fields in this state, and we take that seriously. And I'm getting passionate, but I believe we can't let this moment pass.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? If not, do I hear any motions on House Bill 2?
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Cox.
I'd like to move for a favorable report on HB 2.
We have a motion favorable report.
I'd like to second that.
Have a Representative Isbell, have a second. Okay, we're going to vote on House Bill 2.
Mr.
All in
Chairman.
favor of passing House Bill 2, giving it a favor report, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. House Bill 2 is given a favorable report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll thank you more in a moment. But let's go to the next bill and complete our duty.
Let's bring up House Bill 3, and Representative Poole has explained it in detail. If there are any questions, I'm sure he'll try to answer them, or he will answer them. But do we have any questions on House Bill 3? If not, do I hear a motion? Representative Gaston moves to give House Bill 3 a favorable report. Representative Faust recommends giving, he seconds the motion on House Bill 3. We're going to vote on House Bill 3. All in favor of giving House Bill 3 a favorable report, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. House Bill 3 is given a favorable report. Representative Poole.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank this committee for letting the full body of the House of Representatives debate and address this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you. And Representative Poole, we thank you. I mean, you've gone the